Chapter 37. Yea, hath God said? In January 1974, Marshall Berman, a member of the Political Science Department at City College, CUNY, wrote a perspective essay on, quote, Sympathy for the Devil, Faust, the 1960s, and the Tragedy of Development, end quote. His very able analysis saw the motivation behind the 1960s student revolutionary movement, of which he was a part. In part, it had the spirit of the Doors, a singing group whose song, We Want the World and We Want It Now, was very much in tune with the times. Another aspect of many was the naysaying spirit. To oppose the powers that be was seen as equivalent to virtue. In Genesis 3:1, the tempter raises the question to Eve, Yea, hath God said? Strength and virtue are equated by the tempter with naysaying, and the nay is the essence of freedom. Over the centuries, the naysayers have been many, and they have accused the yea-sayers of being mindless. However, as we read these naysayers such as Shelley, Byron, and Blake, we see an amazing mindlessness on their part. To say nay to the wisdom of God is not an instant certificate of wisdom, nor does it reflect anything but an enthronement of sin as virtue. The premise of such naysaying is that God cannot be right, and that rebellion, instead of being wrong, is freedom and deliverance from tyranny. For God to declare laws that man never gave his assent to is seen as an assault on man's dignity and freedom. Now, the premise of Scripture is that man was created in the image of God, in knowledge, holiness, righteousness or justice, and dominion. Genesis 1:27 following, Colossians 3:10, Ephesians 4:24. Man is God's creation and creature, totally derivative and unoriginal. The only thing original about man is his sin, and even that is an aspect of God's eternal decree. Man seeks originality and freedom, and he believes this is attainable by rebellion against God. It means challenging God's law word, Yea, hath God said? Law expresses God's nature, eternal, unchanging, and totally good, so that God's law is justice. Because God defines justice or righteousness, the rebel against God must deny God's definition. Man is of time, and laws must be also. They must be seen, fallen man holds, as expedient instruments for short-term goals. Man is to be free from law to realize his own being as unbound by anything external to himself. Existentialism is a modern philosophy which fully expresses this faith. The self-realization of man thus means his awareness of himself apart from God as a separate and free being who defines himself. Since man's self-definition is in defiance of God, it is a non-definition because man refuses to accept any given or a priori definition of himself. Man must make and define himself, but this self-definition must be in contempt of God. Moses, confronted by God in the wilderness, is bewildered by what God is. Where has God been since the days of the patriarchs? Who is God and what is his name, his definition? But God refuses to define himself as other than, I am that I am, or I am he who is, the eternally self-existent God. Exodus 3:13 following. Then, however, God declares that he is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is known through his self-revelation, Genesis 3:13. He is known truly, although not exhaustively in his self-revelation, because there are no contradictions in his being. But the essence of man's expression of himself is contradiction. He is made in the image of God, and every atom of his being reveals God, so that the things visible and invisible of God are all known to him. Romans 1:19-21. Man is a walking revelation of God, but also a walking denial of him because, as a sinner, he is totally given to the rejection of his Creator. God's law is therefore anathema to man, because his self-definition requires a rejection of God's law and word. Yea, hath God said, is basic to man's fallen nature, and his premise is, I will have none other God than myself. At times, men have formalized a rebellion into a ritual, declaring, as my will is, so must it be. They often use religion and the church to express their secret hatred of God, and they see themselves as the wise ones of history. But nothing has changed. God's law still prevails, and it judges men and nations